Hello, this is Sheshachalam from Astrogate Mysore. Today, let us get into the subject of Saturn in the fifth house. Fifth house in the horoscope of any native actually shows the Pura Punya Sthana, progeny, that is Putra Sthana, knowledge, Jnana Sthana. Particularly here, one should understand the fourth house is for qualification and the fifth house is for knowledge, Jnana. So it is not qualification. Qualification means like achieving your undergraduate, achieving graduation, then going for post-graduation and so on. But still, it is a continuation of the fourth house, and then comes the fifth house where actually the qualification also just extends a little bit into it. So that means if Saturn is posited in the fifth house and it is weak, we can expect that there might be delay in the native finishing his undergraduation. There might be delay in the native going through his higher studies, and there might also be break in between. Like for example, he is finishing his undergraduation, he finishes it, then gets into a job, or then does not do anything and then gets into the post-graduation or into the masters and doctoral courses later on. But if Saturn is very well placed, 100% these people will study very well. But if the fourth house is weak and the fifth house is strong, this has to be understood. Because I have done a lot of studies with regard to charts in this particular area of education, wherein if the fourth house is weak and the fifth house is strong, usually people discontinue college, but they are very skillful and they continue with whatever skill they have, and they only go into that particular line and they do very well in their professional life as businessmen. So, very good placement for business, because it is the, from the 10th house, if you count 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the 8th house from the 10th house. A very important house, that is, if you have a strong 5th house, then your 10th house, the desire for the 10th house, that is the achievement for the 10th house, is very well done. So if you have a very strong house, it becomes an obstacle for the 10th house. But if you have a very strong 5th house and 6th house, it's an excellent proposition for the 10th house. So 10th house is for profession. Children, with regard to progeny, Saturn usually is like a burden. It is like a lot of weight on a person's responsibility. It's like the person feels that he is, obligated. So this obligation means, obligation is always a difficult thing to carry. So delay in childbirth. Sometimes if retro Saturn is there in the 5th house, I have been, I think there is a video, I'll link that video in the last end page. So in those cases, what will happen is that there will not be childbirth at all. Biological child will not be there in the first case. You will have to go for an adopted child, and after that again you can have a biological child. These things are there in the chart. Like for example, getting married to a person who already has a child. So 5th house, a retro Saturn, is a totally different subject. So let us simply immediately not jump into it. But with regard to education, I have seen retro Saturn in the 5th house. These people do fantastically well. No, it's not fantastic. It's fantastically well. They do very well because they have a lot of perseverance. They will never say die. They do not fail in, they have discontinuations, but mentally they are very strong, head fast. They want to do it. They are very headstrong. They want to do it and they will achieve it. So Saturn retro in the 5th house, these people are strong achievers with regard to education. Difficult with regard to family life and married life. That is because Saturn in the fifth gives a different kind of a character. The fifth house is the another, it's a house in from which you have to understand the character of a person. So the first house, the second house, the fifth house, the sixth house, these are all houses where actually you can understand boldness, fear, intimidation, all these things, whether the person will get intimidated or not, whether the person will be very creative, whether they're knowledgeable. So these things are all forming characters. So from the first house till the seventh house is extremely important to understand the character, and it's very important to understand the other side also, the 8th and 12th houses. So anyway, difficult in pregnancy for women, for charts in women where the Saturn is badly posited in the 5th house, stress and lot of tension with regard to childbirth, and you can, I'm sorry, there is a slight, we can hear that it's raining here. South India, we are having heavy rains here and lot of flooding happening all over Karnataka. So anyway, I am continuing with my classes. So people who tend to go for practical knowledge, implementation, these people are Saturnians. They are very realistic, practical and realistic. So how will a person who is practical and realistic fall in love? It's very difficult, but they will fall in love. Most probably people who are having a retro Saturn in the 5th house usually fall in love because they love honesty. So if they feel that the person, the opposite gender, the person he is very strict and very honest, they will fall in love. Here the values, what they are valuing are different. They love honesty, they love hard work, they love promptness, they don't like falsehood, they love realistic people, they don't like the pomp and the show, the lipsticks, no. They love the reality, just watch your face, be clean, be good, they are happy with you. So they love all these things. They don't like the scents, they don't like the fragrance, they don't like falsehood at all. So they want it to be as real as possible. So 5th house retro Saturn or 5th house normal Saturn, these people love to be realistic. So the house of romance will get ignited if a person of that particular, and who loves honesty, who loves straightforward talking, it's like falling into love with a rebelistic journalist. Just giving you, I like the similes and metaphors when I use them. So I don't know whether it was a simile or a metaphor, but house of romance will get spoiled and suddenly things will change. The whole picture of Saturn in the 5th house will give a different picture. If it is weak and malefically placed, these people tend to get into depression. They tend to get into lot of stress, lot of sleeplessness, and they become sober. They don't like, again, they don't like this pomp and show and partying, but still they become very introvert in nature. So we need to study how Saturn is placed, with whom Saturn is placed, what level of strength Saturn has to understand the 5th house. 5th house is a very important house. There are chances that if you have a slow moving Saturn is always slow moving, but even in the regular movement, Saturn sometimes becomes fast and sometimes becomes slow. So if it is a slow moving Saturn and powerfully posited, the person might fall into a romantic relationship with an elderly person. That is, marrying an elderly person or living with an elderly person can be seen with a strong Saturn in the 5th house. So it might be his or it might be him or her. So it all depends on the spouse age. The spouse's age might be elderly, or sometimes we can see that people in their young age start talking as though they are very matured and very in a very high level of understanding of old people. So these people have friends who are much above their age. People who have a strong Saturn in the fifth house will usually discuss most of the matters with elderly people rather than, because they feel that the other children are their own, in their same age, uh, folks are all very childish. So they do not want to mingle with them. They always want to mingle with the experienced people. So this is where Saturn starts gaining experience from. So the fifth house. So I have finished this point of romance with an elderly person. So they never give free advice. If the Saturn is very well placed and strong in the fifth house, they never give free advice. And if it is weak and retrograde or malefically posited, they unnecessarily give free advice and get caught up into unnecessarily problems. So they love teaching, particularly they love teaching practicals, they love teaching field work, they love teaching agriculture. So they are excellent trainers rather than teachers. So teaching is like you are taking a subject and teaching it, fresh, new. But training is like that these people have already learned this subject. Now they have come to the field for implementation, and that's where the trainers comes. Trainers' role of their game starts, and that's the place where trainers are perfect with Saturn in the fifth house. They can do their work perfectly, very good there. So they need hands-on experience, and these people have a lot of experience. So they should never get into speculation. Anyway, they don't like to get into speculation. They love slow and steady, and they want to go in the normal pace. If Saturn is normally posited, and they would want to go in a very fast pace if it is posited in a retrograde position in the fifth house. But my advice is, do not get into unnecessary trading and market investments if you do not have the knowledge. So the remedy for a bad Saturn in the fifth house is to serve the disabled people, is to serve the people who are old, people who cannot afford to even buy warm clothes in the winter. Help them. So that's a very good thing to do for people who have a bad Saturn in the fifth house. So usually, if I have to stress one important point, difficulty in having childbirth, in most of the charts where Saturn is badly posited in the fifth house, I have seen that. And charts where retro Saturn is badly posited in the fifth house, that is with Rahu or with Mars or with Sun, if it is combust in the fifth house, please unnecessarily do not go into IVFs, because it's a painful process for a female, unnecessarily taking too many steroids. Having a child, yes, it's a boon, it's a beautiful blessing, it's a nice thing to have a child, to have a life in the family, to enjoy a biological child, but still, what is the price you pay? Because you are also somebody's child. So as a woman, please think twice before getting into an IVF treatment, wherein hundreds of injections, steroids, hormonosuppressants, hormonal enhancements, simply they keep pumping in injections without understanding the repercussion, what it has over your body as a self. You go through a lot of depression, you go through a lot of panic, you go through a lot of psychological transformations. That is not good. You will gain weight. So please, if it is not required, you can adopt a child. Please unnecessarily do not go in for these IVFs. I'm not telling it's not good to go for IVF at all. If there is a chance, if there is a small chance that you can have a safe IVF, then go for it. But if you feel that your health is not good and you are, have a lot of other problems, please do not go for IVF, because it might give a lot of side effects which might give difficulty to your body. So if you can avoid it, a lot of children available for adoption. So adoption is the best remedy for a extremely badly posited Saturn in the fifth house. Thank you very much for today's class.